Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to everyone joining us today from across the globe. My name is Anish, and I'm Marketing Manager here at Adform. I'm very lucky today to be joined by Adform's Global Creative Solutions Lead, David Hillier. David's responsibilities include implementing innovation, creative product steering, and the commercialization of new product revenue streams. Shortly, he'll be discussing the art and science of storytelling. Good storytelling techniques form the bedrock of good advertising, and at Adform, our creative technology, including retargeting, dynamic ads, cross-device targeting, and sequential messaging underpinned by an intelligent use of data, is purpose-built for effective and impactful storytelling. If at any time throughout the webinar you have any questions, then please enter them in the control panel, and we'll find time to answer them at the end. This webinar is also being recorded, and we'll distribute a recording to all attendees and registrants. You'll also find a recording along with those of all previous webinars in the Knowledge Center on our website. Now, without further ado, it's over to David.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me clear. Welcome this afternoon. So as you can see here, the title of this is The Art and Science of Storytelling, How to Build Technology-Empowered Ads to Create Vivid Narratives. So this story is going to be in 5 parts. We're going to be 5 chapters to the arts and science of storytelling. We're going to first look at the essence of stories and just try and understand stories. Now, I want to try and make this as brand focused and as industry focused as possible, but it's really good to kind of tap into the essence first in order to do that. We're going to look at stories and brands. So how do brands embrace stories? You know, how are brands becoming storytellers and how have they done that over the years? We're then going to lead to dynamic ads and personalization. So this is great timing for us. We've just released our new dynamic ads product. But as well as that, I'm going to dip into just the topic of DCO and personalization and how all of that kind of falls under one umbrella, but how dynamic ads essentially is the kind of, the leading light in the DCO discussions right now. We're then going to look at connection and just understand the psychology more of storytelling and how we're affected by stories. And then finally, just have a little look to the future. So even though we're starting into the future, well, we're starting with the present, we're going to have a kind of dip into the future and just look at how we can build on the blocks that we already have to tell stories in the future. So chapter 1, the essence of stories. So I did allude to the fact we're going to talk about the future, but let's just kind of start in the past. And stories are really ancient beasts. So I'm going a little bit far back here. But this cave painting is about 14,000 years old, so really ancient. And what became apparent when we first picked up a bit of flint and started carving on walls was that we created a number of different things which have really kind of steered our civilization. We dipped into art for the first time. We looked at culture and kind of created culture. With that came religion as well, just the understanding of iconography and, the notion of religious thought, because we're appreciating something that was kind of we found was above us. And also we started to document and we started to become more process driven. But of course, in all of this, we also became storytellers for the first time. So this convergence was a massive part of our evolution. And of course, stories are both micro and macro. On the mass scale of this, we have the story of the universe, which we're still uncovering. And here's where I first allude to data, and data is going to form a big part of storytelling in this presentation because we have a full stack methodology here, and the cherry on the cake there is the DMP, our data management platform. The big data now is allowing us to understand the universe and how it was created in ways we never did before. And of course, the universe is a patchwork, and it's made up of all of our stories because we are all stories as well. And it's really interesting, we have probably people from multiple countries right now on the call, but even genetically, some of our stories have converged over thousands of years as they're converging today on this call. So it's fair to say stories are part of the fabric of us as well. So it's infancy where I start here with just the essence of stories, because stories are told to us as children to allow us to understand a very complex world, a world that's full of danger, that's full of possibility. And as children, we dip into different elements of stories. Now, it's common to tell children fairy tales or over the years mythology or even religious stories. And these are full of metaphor and allegory that allow us to understand very complex notions of things like love, of death. And it actually kind of really helps our minds, our cognition. It galvanizes that. And of course, we become adults and we become more process focused. But it's important to mention that within each of these processes, there's a story. And that's where the relevance of great advertising comes into play. And now what we're doing in digital is actually allowing for that. But of course, brands also tell stories, and they are in essence the storytellers. Now, there's been great work on the 7 story themes. Christopher Brooker actually did a really great piece, which I recommend. And let's just look at what the 7 story themes are and how they actually pertain to how brand strategy and brand marketing strategy. The first is overcoming the monster. So this is the first theme, the story theme of brands. So here we have Medusa's head, and similarly, we have the head of Big Brother using a very seminal Apple campaign many years ago, which really put their marketing on the map. The second notion is the notion of rebirth. So we see this a lot in advertising. We see a lot in stories. Gatorade used this for their replay campaign. And we'll be talking about emotion and sport later. So it's quite interesting because rebirth is something we actually see in the storytelling of sport. So let's take the example of Roger Federer that we saw recently. This is someone who's achieved a lot, but then won the Australian Open last year, and then all of a sudden that creates this amazing story. And this is part of the reason we're emotionally attached to sport, because of the stories that they give us. And brands latch onto that, and brands also tell their own stories in rebirth. We have the notion of quest. So there are 2 very similar themes here. The first is quest, seen here in IBM's campaign, commonly used by tech brands, and alongside that is journey and return. So that notion of going on a quest, that notion of discovery, and that's really important for brand messaging. And of course, that inspirational side of brands, rags to riches, and that taps into the aspirational side of us. So we see this a lot in automotive, in retail, again in tech. And the opposing ends of the storytelling spectrum and the emotional spectrum, that of tragedy, seen in many charity campaigns, and that of comedy. Hopefully you can all see the funny side of this one, although maybe the butt of the joke didn't. So that's kind of how brands tell stories. And what is the form of stories? Well, this is where story framing comes into play. And I'll talk about story framing for brands in our platform a little later, but let's just look at the notion of story framing here, because we have 5 different parts. So the first is the intro, the story setting. We then have the